You take all the gold that the U.S. supposedly has, and you divide that into the debt, and just the on-books debt, you end up with 135,000. So 107,000 is not crazy.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a different take. 1913, when the Fed started, I don't really believe that you saw. I mean, you did see inflation of assets. You saw that in the 1920s.
Yes.
Then you had the crash in 1929 and the Depression. You know, the worst years were 1931, 1932, 33, when the banks were closing, and the government understood that they had to reflate the system. The only way to reflate the system was to revalue gold. And of course, what they did was they took the population's gold, marked it up, and that fixed the coffers of the U.S. Treasury. What has really changed over the last 6 months to a year in the silver market, and also gold, but primarily in silver, is that if you look at COMEX, you look at the first notice day, first delivery day, the amount that are standing. In the past, it used to be, and let's just use a number of 100. 100 contracts would be standing, and by the end of the month, maybe 15 or 20 were still standing. Now, you start the month with 100, and you may end the month with 200, 250 or more. In other words, there are buyers that are buying in the delivery month with the specific idea of taking delivery. And that is draining, it has been draining inventory. I mean, you can just see the deliveries have been on a massive scale. And I think, enough people are seeing that to understand that the potential of a failure to deliver is very real, very clear, and right in front of us. If Russia or China or any nation stepped in and created a failure to deliver with a series of big trades, that would be a declaration of war.
Aggressive, yes.
Right, and they don't want a declaration of war. Francis, I mean, there's people out there way smarter than you and me that are Chinese, that are Russian, that are Indian, these people know where this game goes. They understand that and central banks across the world, as evidenced by offloading treasuries and onloading gold, they know that when all is said and done, there's going to be a black hole in their balance sheet that was once filled with King Dollar. King Dollar, they understand they got to get out of the way. And let me also say, they do understand fully that the dollar is the Achilles heel of the United States and of the entire Western financial system.
When delivery demand outpaces supply, the system strains. In silver, a failure to deliver, where a seller cannot deliver promised metal, becomes not just theoretical, but real. Such breakdowns erode trust in paper markets and can ignite cascading price spikes. In extreme cases, nations could weaponize large trades in precious metals. That's no longer fringe talk. The possibility is visible now. With the gap between what paper says and what physical exists widening, market participants are watching closely.
This is simple. I think people, like I said, have and are figuring out that the dollar, the days of King Dollar are behind us, and there is going to be a massive revaluation of gold. Gold is, let me put it simply, gold is coming into the system, not out of the system. And for years and years and years, central banks did their absolute best to try to demonetize gold. It didn't work. I guess you got to say the true beginning of the cycle was August 15th, 1971, when the U.S. went off the gold standard. Gold, as you mentioned, bottomed in 2000, 2001. From that point forward, from that point forward, gold has gone higher. But back in the 2000s and the 2000 teens, you would see spectacular smashes of gold and silver that were done with paper, done with naked futures contracts. That has not been happening. I mean, you can go back to, I believe it was October of 2022. If you look at a chart of gold, it became a tractor in first gear. And the reason being that was the month, and you can look on a chart, and it began one day exactly after the Russian reserves were confiscated.
Simultaneously, gold is re-emerging as the centerpiece of monetary hedging. In 2025, gold surged past $4,000 per ounce, hitting new peaks on safe haven demand. Many central banks are shifting away from dollar dependency. A 2025 survey found that a substantial majority now plan to increase gold holdings and reduce U.S. dollar reserves. The combined narrative, a weakening dollar, rising systemic risks, and renewed gold accumulation are reshaping reserve strategies globally.
If you take all the gold that the U.S. supposedly has, and you divide that into the debt, and just the on-books debt, you end up with 135,000. So 107,000 is not crazy.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a different take. 1913, when the Fed started, I don't really believe that you saw. I mean, you did see inflation of assets. You saw that in the 1920s.
Yes.
Then you had the crash in 1929 and the Depression. You know, the worst years were 1931, 1932, 33, when the banks were closing, and the government understood that they had to reflate the system. The only way to reflate the system was to revalue gold. And of course, what they did was they took the population's gold, marked it up, and that fixed the coffers of the U.S. Treasury. From that point forward, then we had World War II, which was very, very inflationary. The U.S. took on a ton of debt, and that was the cause, if you will, of Nixon going off the gold standard, because you had foreign nations, in particular France with de Gaulle, saying, here's $35, we want an ounce of gold. And they did that because they believed an ounce of gold was more valuable than $35, which, of course, they were correct.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm going to stick with 1971 as opposed to 1913.
Yeah, maybe they cleaned it up sufficiently that there was no carryover damage in the early 30s, because it took them a while to first start creating the inflation and the over expenditure rule and all of that. Maybe that takes some time, but certainly I'm not going to argue about 1970 being such a critical date.
To understand the current moment, one must trace history. Nixon's 1971 departure from the gold standard marked a turning point. Since then, gold was gradually sidelined, until now. After decades of paper-driven manipulations and future speculation, we may be entering a reversal. Today's stress in the silver market echoes earlier episodes when monetary regimes cracked under inflation, overdebt, or war. What's unfolding now may be seen as the early stages of a remonetization of gold and silver, not as side assets, but as core monetary tools.
And many people will refer to 2020 in the future as a result of the CV19. I think that's still too fresh in our minds to see how historically significant. It was the end of that 40-year bond market that they managed to manufacture with when Holter pushed the rates right up. And that's going to go, that was the pulling of America's bottomless credit card. I certainly think that's going to pop as a far more significant date when we put years between us in it. Because I also feel everybody, tell me if you feel this, Bill, everyone else feels like they're sleepwalking on the severity of what this means. Essentially, we're talking about the end of hegemony, but it's not even a friendly handover like the British to the US post World War II. It was kind of, you eased the baton out of the British hands and patted them on their head. There wasn't anyone getting beaten up about it. They obviously suffered and were the poor man of Europe for decades, paying the Marshall Plan and not having the hegemony currency anymore.
Right.
And that was a massive hit for them in a friendly way. This one isn't. It's a parallel system actively being built due to loss of faith in the original fiat-based system. And do you feel people truly are conceptually grasping the cost of living, the crisis that comes with the dollar and debt debasement? Because I don't.
Yeah, the handover is going to be extremely tumultuous. And I think the biggest problem is that when this happens, everyone in the West is going to absolutely disdain the United States, because they'll understand that it was the dollar, that it was policies, it was U.S. policies that caused a disaster in the Western world.
Beneath the surface, cracks spread in the statistical facade. Payroll numbers, labor data, inflation indices, long proclaimed as hard anchors of policy, are being questioned. Revisions and methodological tweaks have invited skepticism. Many professionals now argue that these figures serve political ends. If you undermine trust in official metrics, the system's foundations wobble. As confidence in data erodes, so does belief in policies built atop them. That crisis of credibility amplifies demand for tangible assets outside the control of central planning.
So from within the Western world, I think there's going to be hatred toward the U.S. And then outside of the Western world, you look at the BRICS nations. I hope this doesn't happen, but they have every right to shit on the United States, shit on the West, because it was our financial engineering that led up to and caused what's about to happen.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And the downturn, I've got a theory, Bill, that I'd like your take as well. We certainly exposed the lie that was the labor numbers. We've been saying for 3 years what a great lie it was. We've had countless revisions and revisions upon revisions. We had 1 million. They said there was no recession because they had a red-hot labor market. You might remember that phrase. Both Yellen said it, and of course Powell repeated it, I believe. And then we suddenly realized that there was fake employment. It was government employment. It was contractors to government. And some of it was just superfluous misrepresentation through the birth-death model. And that actually has us believe that we've been more weak as an economy. We were in a recession when we met those criteria. They can't come and intervene it, and the economy has been far weaker. Now they've suddenly acknowledged all that, and they've turned it on the recession. And I'm now harping upon the next lie that hasn't been fully admitted, and all government statistics are now propaganda at the end of empire times, and that's the inflation and CPI. How do you feel about the degree that that's been understated, especially when we take the dollar into account, having lost 12% to the euro, which is not a great currency in its own right?
We are entering a volatile transition. The descent of dollar dominance, systemic leverage, and despair in fiat confidence may prelude a rebirth. In this metamorphosis, gold and silver could transform from speculative bets to pillars of value. Markets may experience violent swings, failures, and resets. At the end of that storm may lie a new monetary architecture, one where real metal, not debt-backed paper, plays a central role. The next chapters will be written not just in spreadsheets, but in vaults, delivery halls, and global reserve ledgers.
Well, this would be a good question to ask John Williams. I mean, John Williams does, has calculated all the numbers, the inflation, the unemployment, GDP. He's calculated all of them the way they do back in the 1980s, before there were changes upon changes upon changes on how they calculated them. And of course, every change became more government friendly, if you will, made things look better than what they are. My simple comment is, in my professional career, because I started in 1983, in my professional career, probably 99% of all numbers were incorrect, and in fact, some of them were outright bullshit. It's been self-serving for these numbers that have come out in the past that look so good. And I'm going to ask you kind of a question here, Francis. Do you believe that the timing is odd, that all of a sudden we're finding out that the numbers are bogus when it looks like the road ends 100 feet in front of us, while remembering that the laws of the great taking are in place all over the world. So my question, I guess, would be, is it a coincidence? Is it odd? What's your take on now they're pulling the curtain back to show us or to allow us, the average person, to see that the numbers are bogus, and then they pull the rug on the markets?
Yeah, I mentioned that as part of this collapse, which will be almost a fire, a phoenix, that will come up.
No, not almost. Not almost. It's going to be a fire.